Good afternoon, everybody. I welcome everyone to this parallel session this afternoon here on the Knowledge Share Fair event. We just take a few more seconds and see if a few people are joining us. You can see the housekeeping rules on the screen. I'm sure if you have participated earlier, you already have familiarized yourself with them. If not, it's good to have a look at it and keep your microphones muted. Otherwise, I'm happy to welcome you all. Also happy to welcome Mr. Ainu Fenta, who is presenting this session this afternoon. Our topic is women and water for change, how basically women and youth empowerment in rural communities in Tanzania and Uganda can lead or have led to more sustainable and resilient water use. I would like to introduce Mr. Fenta to you. Mr. Fenta is a natural resource management specialist with focus on transboundary water resource management, governance that affects human relations based on the availability of water and water resources. He has led policy events on transboundary water governance based on international water law and principles of integrated water resource management. He previously worked with the Ethiopian Nile National Discourse Forum, with the World Wildlife Forum, and Helvetas Swiss Intercorporation. Presently, Mr. Fenta is working with the Nile Basin Discourse in the capacity of a regional program monitoring and evaluation officer. Mr. Fenta earned bachelor's and master's degrees in political science and international relations from Addis Ababa University in Ethiopia. He also earned a postgraduate diploma in environmental impact assessment from Nkumba University in Uganda. With this information, I would like to ask our host to start with the presentation that we should see now.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone wherever you are. My name is Ayenal Sarafanta, Regional Monitoring and Evaluation Officer of the Nile Basin Discourse. The Nile Basin Discourse is a regional network of civil society organizations with over 600 members that operates across 10 Nile Basin countries, with its headquarters or secretariat located in Entebbe, Uganda, and the national chapters in all the 10 countries. The topic of my presentation today is empowering women and youth as a means for creating sustainable, climate-resilient future. Presentation outlines, I will quickly follow the outlines indicated here: introduction, methodological approach, project and its impact, lessons learned, conclusion, or way forward. In the introductory part, I will try to specify the context. We are in sub-Saharan Africa, where environmental pressures are very acute, such as periods of water shortage and flooding become more frequent, pollution of ecosystems and degradation of natural resources threatening livelihoods and the prospects for future generations. Climate change, urbanization, and migration Without sustainable infrastructure and adequate adaptation of food production, processing and consumption would further drive the ongoing decline downwards. So the transition to a more sustainable, fair and equal path for societies requires leadership that is able to appreciate the natural, social and political dimensions of all these problems. Poor water management and lack of wash facilities affect women and girls disproportionately, and we all know this. Cognizant of this fact, NBD partnered with IH Delft and secured funding from Coca-Cola Foundation and designed a project on women and water for change in communities. The aim was to empower women and youth in rural communities in Tanzania and Uganda. So the project was implemented in Mara Mora catchment, Tanzania, and Mabamba Bay in Uganda, both of which are found within the Lake Victoria Basin. Poor women and jobless youth were selected from rural villages and provided with tailored trainings to enable their skills required to take on a leadership role in decision regarding water use, natural resource management, and public health, with ultimate purpose of making them climate change resilience champions. In terms of methodological approach, the project deployed multiple methodologies, a combination of research approach, which was used to stimulate and reflect on ways to support women and youth who aspire to be leaders, entrepreneurs, and agents of change. The project also used educational program methodology, which provided tailored-made training for women and youth leaders within the local community structures, like water user associations, schools, etc., on key and relevant topics. The project also used a communication skill development approach, particularly to build the confidence of youth and women so that they would be effectively engaged in decision-making processes. We also used expert presentation tools combined with practical demonstration skills on various issues: water, environment, climate interactions, entrepreneurship, and creation of green jobs. And these were done by professionals and fellow innovators from different backgrounds. We also used exhibitions and testimonies of women and youth champions through forum theater. All these were used to enhance knowledge and skills of the trainees. We also used method of community caravan learning, which is a tool used to facilitate exchange learning visits within communities, assisted by a facilitator, of course. And this was home-to-home learning tool, which was aimed to identify local champions as agents of change and to review key gaps and how the gaps or the groups can assist to fill the identified gaps. In terms of the project impacts, I would talk on two levels: impacts on the beneficiaries and impacts on the decision makers. With regard to impacts on beneficiaries, the findings of the project monitoring exercise, which was done using semi-structured questionnaire method, showed that about 83.3% of the trainees gained knowledge or skills on entrepreneurship in the green field, with 66.7% of them already exercising the skills they gained. So the trainees confirmed that They created green jobs. They embarked on vegetable gardening, like planting cabbage, spinach, and pumpkins for their own home consumption and for the local markets. They generally reported better outcome of the training on their knowledge and skills, a positive impact of the training on the creation of green jobs. And they urged the need to continue the training in an expanded manner. With regard to impacts on decision makers, we had communications to the local leaders in both countries. So the local leadership agreed to be part of the project innovation in seeking solutions for challenges facing women and youth. In Uganda, for instance, there was a huge turnout of the local leadership in the meetings organized by women group, which enabled the women group to share the challenges they faced during implementation of the activities. The leadership promised that they would provide support to the women and youth, especially in enforcing laws on sanitation. Similarly, in Tanzania, the Lake Victoria Basin Water Board showed interest in working with civil society organizations in dealing with challenges facing women and youth in the Mara-Mora catchment, promising inclusion of more CSO representatives in the Mara-Mora Catchment Forum, which is an independent, loose coalition of all catchment residents and stakeholders who are represented by Water Users Association and accountable only to the local governors. With regard to lessons learning, it was identified that empowerment is widely reduced to income generation for women and youth, but additional income doesn't automatically improve the status of women and youth. So empowerment projects should focus on creating agency and giving space to women and youth to exercise that space. So building a solid base for skill development is very key. Many of trainings and capacity building activities have little long-term impact. Project support activities too often collapse as soon as external support is finished. Reason is not lack of will or motivation, but lack of fundamental cognitive abilities necessary to benefit from the training. So we need to focus on something that brings fundamental change in the cognitive abilities of the trainees. Effective capacity development for women entrepreneurs has to assess and address skills in a more comprehensive manner, not in a piecemeal on skills. The caravan is the best way to transform communities, as it is a practical mindset changing learning exercise for those who participated in it. So, for any program that is intending to change communities fundamentally, it should be centered on mindset change activities. In the way of conclusion or way forward, I would say the following. There is a need to involve all the governance and administrative structures at all levels of the local council and other stakeholders which were not included in this pilot project, like schools, army barracks, tourism investors, and expand the experience into communities in and around Lake Victoria Basin, including Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. There is also need to organize youth and women showcase weekend, weekday events, such as Women's Day, Youth Day, Environmental Day, etc. This would enable communities to showcase what they have learned and practice it and share experience, so that this would enable communities to enhance their capacities and better plan for their future. There is also need to have household clustering technique, which would help a set of householders learn from each other, account to each other, and monitor each other through positive sanctions. So clustering should be done probably into 3 levels. The one is for those that are excelling in wash facilities, waste management, environmental management, and creation of green jobs. And those at the intermediary level and those at the beginner level, so that they learn from each other, account to each other, and sanction to each other. There is need to introduce economic component or the income generation activities into the group activities that is informed by best practices proved to work for communities elsewhere as far as economic empowerment is concerned. There is need to improve tree planting, provide sufficient lands, and organize communities into environmental clubs and train them in environmental management, starting from demonstration of tree planting, nursery bed formations, etc. There is also need to innovate on ecotourism. Mavamba Bay is an internationally recognized Ramsar site, rich in biodiversity. There is already preliminary infrastructure. There is already established community system, boat owners, tour guides, etc. But all need to be improved to meet international standards. So avenues of doing a very practical, participatory, and community-led ecotourism project needs to be explored. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fenta, and thank you for this presentation. Very interesting indeed. I would like to encourage our participants to ask questions directly to Mr. Fenta. You can do this by raising your hand, and I will call you up, and you can post or articulate your question by yourself. Just don't be shy. We are very happy to have a vital discussion on such topic, and I'm sure we want to learn from each other's experiences and from also what Mr. Fenta has just shared with us in this presentation. So, Dominic, you please go ahead, share with us.
Yes, Josh, thank you. Thank you so much for the moderation, and also thank you, and very practical. Thinking that empowerment is in the economic sense. Yes. And yet you are encouraging creating of agency and giving space to exercise it. I did not give, yes, it's very true as a field person, a person who has also done some bit of community work, people are actually taking economic empowerment to be the empowerment that we are thinking about. But then the solution to it that you are giving, I'm not getting the real, the exact clarify. Can you please clarify on the creating agency and giving space to exercise it, what you exactly meant? Thank you. Back to you, Joshen.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Dominic. I give the question to Mr. Fenta.
Thank you, Mr. Dominic. Thank you, John, for your excellent moderation. Yes, empowerment is a very misleading word to say the least, because it is connected with economization of individuals, communities, or groups. But to be honest, economic empowerment doesn't automatically guarantee an individual or a group or a community to have a strong say or participation or involvement in decision-making processes. What is important is creating agency. What we mean by creating agency, we mean to have institutions, to have legal and policy frameworks that in need support, encourage, and sanction the much needed involvement and participation of women and any other marginalized groups in a given community. So unless empowerment is not looked in its broad spectrum to include institutions, legal and policy frameworks, economic empowerment only doesn't give any good ground for someone, a group, individual, or community member to have a strong slot in the decision-making process. That is what I mean by creating agency and giving slot for women and youth to play their role in that agency. I hope the question is a bit clear now.
Thank you, Mr. Fenter. I have another question here from Alex in the chat box. He's asking to kindly elaborate a bit more on the community caravan learning tool. So maybe you can explain a bit more on that one, Mr. Fenter.
Yeah, sure. Community caravan learning, as it is explained in the PowerPoint presentation, is a kind of home-to-home tour by members of that particular community. This tool was tested in Mabamba Bay, in 3 villages in Mabamba Bay in Uganda. What we did, we selected a group of women in each of the 3 villages, and we selected homes to be visited with regard to wash facilities, with regard to creation of green jobs, with regard to waste management and environmental management, so that communities themselves learn from their colleagues, from their fellow community members, because seeing by practice is more, hindering and enshrining than teaching someone theoretically. So we made home-to-home tours. We enabled those selected community members to see what a house member, a woman colleague is doing in those selected areas, wash facilities, waste management, environmental facilities. So it was very amazing. They learned practically what is going on in the homes of their fellow colleagues. And their fellow colleagues taught those participants about how they are doing in these areas. So it was very practical. It was very mindset changing activity, and even though it was limited because of time and because of resource, it was really a fantastic tool, to bring fundamental real change within communities in the areas of sanitation and water supply, in the areas of waste management, how a home or house manages the waste, and how they are taking care of themselves, their livelihoods, by planting, those garden vegetables around their homes. So that was all about the community caravan learning tool, and it was very, very amazing.
Thank you, Mr. Fenta. I would like to take this opportunity to ask a question myself. Yeah, your presentation clearly shows the positive effects of your initiative on livelihoods, and as such, of course, also plays an important role on community resilience. And but I would like to ask you, especially regarding the water aspects of your project, how you think your approach is playing a role in increasing climate resilience on the issue of water in the project area. So where do you see the effects outside of creating livelihoods on particularly water-based and water-focused resilience?
Thank you very much, John. That is, I think, a very important question. The link between the environmental management and water management is, I think, very clear and very direct. Community members in both of the target beneficiaries in Maramora catchment and in Mavamba Bay were, directly affecting the water resource actually for their survival. They were cutting trees around. They were, disposing the waste into the catchment, into the water, into the streams, into the lake. Their water management strategy and tool was kind of traditional. It was not based on water productivity. It was not based on water economization. So we actually taught them, tools on how to manage the environment, on how to manage the waste they are disposing into the waters, the lake and the rivers, with the sanitation challenges and the way they can improve sanitation. So the connection was that by managing the environment, it is possible to manage the water resource around. And that would ensure, in one way or another, resilience of the water systems around, community residents, around community, livelihood areas. So that was the link between the environmental management and the water resilience, water resource management, if I correctly addressed your question, John.
Thank you very much. This was very helpful. I have another question from a colleague of ours. And here we want to ask, what kind of challenges did you encounter during the project? And what can be learned from the challenges you have encountered?
Very good. Of course, one of the obvious challenge was resource limitation in terms of funding and in terms of getting skilled facilitators, especially for our community caravan exchange tools. So that is why we were limited our caravan exercise, our community learning caravan exercise, in only 3 villages. The other challenge was, getting the schedule of communities themselves. They're busy They are engaged in several activities related to their livelihood and other social engagements. So getting right schedule for our tour was also another big challenge that we were facing. So in terms of getting facilitators, we tried to get more partners on board. We dealt with some NGOs that have experience in WASH and in environmental management, like BirdLife International, like the Water and Sanitation Network Uganda. So we tried to get experienced facilitators from those partners. So in terms of getting the right schedule for the community caravan, we actually were keeping on changing schedules, to get more participation from community members to fit our schedule with their schedules. So that was another challenge, which a little bit created delays in our project implementation. These were the two big challenges that we faced. And I'm sure there were also challenges here and there, but those were not as big as this. Back to you, John.
My mic is muted.
Let me unmute. Yes, sorry, my mic is muted. I have another question for you, Mr. Venter. How do you measure resilience in this project, given the term is hardly defined in quantitative terms? Have you conducted any impact analysis? Are you with? Have you understood the question?
Yeah. That is a very challenging question. Resilience is a very big term to measure and even to understand. One thing is that this project was just a pilot project. It started in 2018 and ran for about roughly 2 years up to end of 2019. So it is not possible really to measure resilience, community resilience within this short period of time. And, to measure the impact of the project, it needs some sort of impact control mechanism because, the contribution factor is very big here. A lot of issues, a lot of activities, a lot of interventions contribute to resilience. So honestly speaking, it is not really possible to measure resilience in real terms for this pilot project. And there was, as I said, lack of impact control mechanism to really, judge and measure the impact of the project on resilience.
Thank you, Mr. Venter. Yes, I think it's important to notice that resilience is always looking at a long-term approach. And so having projects that are just encountering 2-3 years, it often doesn't clearly show the effects as we talk about the complex system that and also about complex changes that need to be encountered. do you know if there has been a similar project that with a similar setup that has measured resilience, or do you know also about projects that have been going over a longer term, or are such activities planned, or do you know of any of those activities planned in this specific region that you were working in?
Well, this may need research, and a comprehensive assessment. Honestly speaking, I have not come across that kind of project with a similar effect or impact on resilience.
Okay, all right, so good. Thank you for sharing. Yes, it would be interesting to see what long-term effects would there be, and yeah, how resilience would be measured by the population itself. Another question is, you mentioned that this was a pilot project. And are there any efforts to upscale this project somewhere else? Do you have any tips or recommendations on how to upscale your approach? Is there anything, that you can give to the audience regarding this?
Yeah, that's a very relevant question. As I tried to mention in my PowerPoint presentation, yes, this is a pilot project in terms of the time span and in terms of the coverage of the beneficiaries. So now we are trying, we are making efforts to upscale this pilot project, expanding the coverage of beneficiaries and the time span. We are dealing with Coca-Cola Foundation through IHE Delft on how to scale up this project and on how to maintain the positive results that the pilot project has registered. So our effort to scale up in terms of the area coverage is to include at least 3 main countries around Lake Victoria, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, and to include more communities in these 3 countries. And the important recommendation obtained during the pilot project implementation was to include more men, as more men as possible, not only women, and also to include government representatives at local levels, as they're the ones who will play a key role in creating agency and in enforcing laws. So in short, we are working to upscale the pilot project in terms of its area coverage, inclusion of more beneficiaries, and the profile of the beneficiaries themselves. So if the negotiation with the donor, Coca-Cola Foundation, through IHE Delft is successful, then we will definitely upscale the project. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Now we're coming slowly to an end of the session. So we have one last question, which I would like to share from my colleagues at GIZ NWAS. It is basically looking at what is your practical approach in order to upscale women's and youth empowerment in rural communities in Water for Change. I mean, you mentioned part of it, but maybe you want to answer this question.
Yeah, that is, I think, the gist of the project. How are we going to empower women and youth in rural communities? Do the trainings, that conventional trainings we are used to, really empower women and youth in rural communities? Or do the income generation activities alone empower women and youth in rural communities? So the question is no. So to really, bring empowered women and youth in rural communities, we need a very comprehensive skill training. We need a combination of economic empowerment with creating agency, with creating institutions, with creating laws and policies that translate the actual leadership of women and youth within communities. So it should be a very comprehensive package, not a piecemeal approach that really brings empowerment of women and youth in rural communities. So it should be combination of skills training, economic approach, creation of agencies. When we combine all this, then I would say we would really gain the desired result in empowering women and youth in rural communities.
Thank you, Mr. Fenter. Thank you very much for addressing all these very good questions and also for sharing this presentation on this topic with us. I think it's an interesting aspect to look at, and also I hope that we will see more of this initiative in the future. And I would like to thank everybody who came to this parallel session. Please, if we close now this session, be aware we are continuing our Share Fair event with the exhibition that you can see, and also the sessions that are continuing. Thank you so much for participating, coming to this session. Thank you, Mr. Fenter, for your input, and I wish you all a great afternoon.
Thank you, John, for your excellent moderation. I would like to thank all the participants for their inspiring questions and their contribution to the discussion. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.